Omajnana Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshornitanyena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. And devout pranams to our Brahma-samhita group study members here. I'm here at the home of Suvasini Didi today in Wexford, Ireland, and we're co-hosting today. And so we're moving through Brahma-samhita. We've reached verse 53. We're almost at the end. We're almost at the conclusion. And I'm so happy that we are doing this together. It's a little bit of a heavy going text in some places, right? But in a group, context, and it all becomes a little sweeter and easier. Okay, so we can start. So pick up with verse 53. Dharmota papanichaya shuttaya stap. Oh, I'm in Bhagavad Gita meter now. Here's Krishna and Johnny coming. Dharmata papanichaya shuttaya stapamsi. Brahma nikita patagava dayascha jiva. Yadata matra vibhava prakata prabhava. Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, by whose conferred power is manifest the potency in religion, irreligion, or all types of sins, the shrutis, the penances, and all beings from Brahma to the worm and insect. Purport. Dharma, religion or duty, refers to Varna Dharma and Ashram Dharma, or the socio-religious codes as given by the 20 books of law, Smriti, whose origin is traced in the Vedas. Varna Dharma is the fourfold division according to men's natures of Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Ashram Dharma refers to the fourfold formal religious gradations of Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi for persons of the appropriate qualifications. All the codes of conduct for the human being have been delineated within these twofold dharmas of Varna and Ashram. All kinds of sins means the roots of sin, ignorance and sinful desire, and grave sins, less grave sins, and general sins. Or Mahapatak, Anupatak, Patak, etc. That is all types of illicit conduct. The Shrutis refers to the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Veda, along with the Upanishads, which form the crest jewels of the Vedas. The penances refers to whatever practices are to be learned for the furtherance of righteousness or religion. In many instances, very painful austerities called Panchatapa, etc., are indicated in pursuance of eightfold yoga or Brahman liberation. So, let's finish this purport before we have discussion. All the above forms are within the purview of the cycle of mundane work or karma of the conditioned souls who wander throughout 8,400,000 species of life, including gods, demons, humans, nagas, kannadas, and gandharvas, etc. They range unlimitedly from Brahma down to the insignificant insect. Each possess a certain potency, giving them proficiency in certain functions. But those potencies are not axiomatic. They are only the manifestation of whatever might is sanctioned for them by Sri Govinda. So it's something that can sound a little curious, right? That, okay, we can understand why the Lord's potency is manifest in Dharma, right? In religion. But how is it that his potency is also manifest in irreligion, right? His potency is also manifest in sin, as well as in so many scriptural activities, rituals, penances, right? And in all beings, from Lord Brahma, the creator, down to the most insignificant creature, such as a worm or ant. How is such a thing possible? And the answer is actually in something that Dulal Krishna Prabhu brought up yesterday. he asked this question about Achincha Beda Be. And it's a very helpful point to understand, because later on I had a further discussion with Dulal about it, and it's a concept that pervades pretty much everything, and it's a concept that can be applied in many different areas. And it's also one of those things, like, I can't remember who it was, I think it was one of our sannyasis who joked once, like, if you don't know the answer to something, you can just say Achincha Beda Be. Inconceivably one and different, right? So I would also say that this concept is applicable here, right? That the Lord's power is present everywhere, directly or indirectly, right? Nothing is actually possible without his power, without his sanction. And so remember, this whole world is like a correctionary institute, right? Where, how should we say, dysfunctional souls are going through some correctionary procedure to help them become functional, healthy souls, abnormal souls. But it's a long-term treatment plan, right? And so there's room for them to make mistakes, right? Just like a loving guardian, in the course of trying to instruct their charge, may allow them deliberately to make mistakes, which they will learn from, right? So indirectly, there's some correction going on when the child puts their finger into the fire, right? Or whatever it may be, when the parent is allowing that to take place. So again, right? Nothing is possible. Nothing in existence is possible without the Lord's potency being behind it. So whether it is directly or indirectly, his energy is everywhere. Otherwise, its existence would not be possible. And another point that comes up here is, love is held to be the highest principle, and free will is a part of that, a necessary part of that. And so, therefore, it's necessary to allow the souls to be deviant, right? As a part of their expression of free will, if they're choosing not to seek out a relationship of love with the Lord, right? So it is like that. It's all part of the freedom that the souls are gifted with by the Lord. Let's see. Anyone have any other comment? Didi, any comment you'd like to make?
We have the freedom to make mistakes, right?
The freedom, come closer so they can hear better.
Yeah, this one says this is the freedom to commit mistakes, right? It is like, as you said, we learn like a child learning from that experience. So yeah,
I'm going to sit here. You can read the next verse maybe too. Yeah, so next we're going on to 54. Here, sit here. No, sit here for this one. Come on.
we're going to 54, yeah?
Everyone's saying hello to you.
Hello, Dandavats. Dandavats, everyone. Dulal Krishna, Dandavats. Let's, yeah. So, I think go on to verse 54 now. Yes, Indra Gopam Atavendram Aho Swakarma Bandhanurupa Phala Bhajanam Atanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kim Tuja Bhakti Bhajam Govindam Madi Purusham Tammaham Bhajami. Translation: whether one may be the tiny insect Indragopa or the great king of the gods, Lord Indra, he impartially awards all souls on the path of karma the fruits befitting their deeds. Yet it is so wonderful. He burns at the root all the karma of the souls who adore him. I worship him, the primeval Lord Govinda. But the Supreme Lord is impartial in awarding the conditioned soul the fruits of their karma or mundane deeds. According to their previous actions, he awards them their future engagements. But he gives his special grace to his devotees. He purges out by the fire of ordeal all the righteous or unrighteous, righteous or unrighteous, karma along with its root, that is the desire to perform karma and nishan. What is
nescience?
Nescience.
Ignorance.
Yeah. Although karma is beginningless, it is nonetheless destructible. Karma is indestructible for those who act in the hope of enjoying the fruits of their actions. Their vicious circle of karma can never be terminated. Even the religious duty of sannyasa is a type of karma befitting a certain religious status. In that practice, as long as the practitioner remains hankering for its fruit of liberation, his observance. In that practice, as long as the practitioner remains hankering for its fruit of liberation, his observance of sannyasa cannot please Krishna or gain his grace. The sannyasis accrue the fruits of their karma, and even when their actions become desireless to the extreme, they attain the paltry fruit of self-satisfaction, atmaramata. But those who are true devotees perpetually cultivate divine service to Krishna in a way pleasing to him, totally abandoning all semblance of fleeting desires and independent attempts of jnana, karma, etc. Krishna totally annihilates all their karma, desires for karma, and nishans. Despite his impartiality, Krishna's partiality to his devotees is a matter of marvel.
Beautiful. Anything you want to share with the group?
This is, it is so nice. It's like he burns at the root all the karma, right? All the souls who adore him. That is so nice. Yeah, even the sannyas dharma, right? Even he says like, even that is like, if it is not for pleasing Krishna, no, you have to, if it is only for your own liberation or something, then it is still your accrue the, the karma, right? So it is like, it's like we have the practice of karma yoga. It is not like, it's also coming to that same point, like it is nothing for your own achievement or, like it is only for not your self-satisfaction. It is only, you do everything for the satisfaction of the Lord, then you don't accrue that any karma. So everything has to be focused in that way. So everything we do, even the highest varna, right? Sannyas is still, it's there is still, it can be, it can accrue some karma. Even that, the highest, still.
Thank you, Didi. Welcome, Jayadev Ji, also joined us. So very nice verse, very nice points brought up by Suvasini Didi here. And I like this, this point here. It's so nice, like our gurus, they're so radical, actually. in their approach. And they're so as Suvasini Didi was saying, so the sannyas ashram, right? It is a social role, actually. It has some coloring of, society, this worldly plane. And for that reason, actually, so many persons opposed Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati when he introduced that into Lord Chaitanya Dev Sampradaya, right? Because it's nothing to do with the exchange of pure love with the Lord, right? It is a social role. But Saraswati Thakur employed that for a particular reason, because we're not liberated souls and we need some type of structure and standard. It helps us at our current stage, right? But so as Suvasindi was saying, right, that also is something that can accrue karma. It's just being performed in a ritualistic way. But then here things that go a little radical, saying like what is the highest attainment of like perfectly following sannyas? It's Bhakti Vinod is saying here, the paltry fruit of self-satisfaction. Yeah. This is referring to, an Atmaramata. This is referring to liberation, like merging into the Brahman, like becoming free from the mundane entanglement, right? And tasting the bliss of the self. And so this is something that's widely celebrated, aspired for throughout the whole Vedic culture, right? It's something highly sought after, and persons undergo so many extreme austerities to that end, right? But to the Vaishnavas, this is being described as a paltry fruit, something very insignificant, right? This is mentioned in different places in our Vaishnava Acharya's writings. The other day we were looking at a well-known verse of Rupa Goswami and the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where he's outlining 6 principal characteristics of bhakti. And one of them is moksha laguta krit, that it makes moksha look very insignificant. It makes moksha look very light, like nothing. So this is the one, like, why, how can they say such a thing? Because they're perceiving, they're experiencing, they're tasting something that is of far higher value. Whatever bliss can be experienced within oneself is nothing compared to what can be tasted in connection with the Lord, who is a personification of bliss, who is the ocean ever, what is it? Nandam Buddhi Vardhanam, right? Ever expanding infinite ocean of bliss, of Ananda, right? So Bhakti Vinod can speak in this very dismissive way of this attainment of Atmarama. And
we also read this Prabodhananda Saraswati.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, there Prabodhananda takes it a step even further. Higher, yeah. It's like hell for the devotee. And another thing I wanted to mention is I'm reminded of this Bhagavad Gita verse. We were discussing this in another meeting not too long ago, in chapter 9, that verse where Krishna, is it Samoham Sarvabhuteshu Name Dvesho Name Priyaha, right? And then I forget the second line. Ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayi teteshu chapyaham. But is it Ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayi teteshu chapyaham? Yeah, this is a well-known verse in chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is making a similar statement that I'm equal to everyone. I don't play favorites, right? Nobody is especially dear to me. No one is especially, inimical. I'm not against anyone. I'm not for anyone. But then he says, however, ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya. But however, those who approach me with love, I am with them. I'm going after them. I'm also approaching them with love. I'm partial to them, right? Aham bhakta pradino hyastatancha evadvita sarubir grasta hirdayo bhakter bhakta janapriya. The devotees have this ability to capture the Lord's heart, to hold him in the cage of their love, actually. There's a statement of Srila Saraswati Thakur where he says, Krishna is the personal property of his devotees. So this is similar here. Krishna's, through, not directly, right? Krishna's in the delegation program. He's delegating his agents, and they are impartially dispensing the results of persons' actions, right? But for those who are approaching it, it's kind of like a bureaucracy, like the difference between approaching something through a bureaucracy or approaching through a person, right, who calls the shots. There's a big difference there, right? So it's like that. There's this whole bureaucracy going on where you have to go through this impersonal mechanical system, or you can go to the center. You have a relationship with the person at the top, right? And all the benefits that go, there was all those benefits that go along with that, right? And then another interesting point worthy of note here is that he burns at the roots, right? What does that imply? It may not be such an easy or comfortable process. He burns at the root all the karma of the souls who adore him. Right? And then also this point, right? That what is that root? And what is being entailed here? A transformation of consciousness, right? Because the root of all karma is ultimately selfishness, self-centeredness, selfishness. This is the real root of all karma and of all suffering. So what is Krishna consciousness? It's a transformation of consciousness, right? This is taking things to the root. And this is why Krishna consciousness is radical. And this is mentioned from the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? What is it? Top try unmulanam. Right, tapa try is referring to the threefold miseries of mundane existence, right? The adi-atmic, adi-bhotik, adi-daivik, the suffering that comes from within, the suffering that comes from others, the suffering that comes from the elements, from the devas, right? So, but Srimad Bhagavatam is saying here, we're bringing that up from the root. Right? We're not just dealing with the symptoms. We're going right to the root cause and we're taking it we're uprooting it. Right? And what is the root? That is that bhayam dvitiya binivesha tasva, that second perception of something secondary to Krishna. Right? There's only one flow, one current, it's the Krishna current, the Krishna channel. Right? But we're tuned into another channel, which has temporary, fleeting value. So perceiving a secondary interest, that is the root cause of all the problems that we face. And this point here is also interesting, right? It's the way this is phrased is kind of interesting, right? Like whether it's there's a tiny insect called Indra Gopa, or whether you're the great king of the lords, Lord Indra, you're all going through the same thing, actually. You're all pretty much in the same level, like from a broader perspective, right? And this point is actually mentioned, it's phrased in a similar way, mentioning Lord Brahma, right? Abrahma bhuvana loka. You remember the rest of that verse? It's saying a similar thing, that everyone, like from Lord Brahma, the creator, the greatest created being, down to the lowest in this plane, the lower planes, like they're all subject to rebirth, right? So it's an interesting point, right? And there's one place where I've heard Srila Sridhar Maharaj highlighting this point. Right, you can, Lord Brahma, like he lives for trillions of years, right? His day is equal to what is it, 8.4 billion years? Like his day and his night is of the same duration. So like, how long does he live, and what type of, subtle, wonderful things is he in contact with? But he is also subject to mortality. So the absolute height the highest point that you can reach in this mundane plane, that's also temporary. That's also within this plane of temporary relativity. That's also an undesirable thing. There's no security there, right? So that's also an interesting point. We're all more or less in the same boat, right? Whether you live for a few days, like some insects, or whether you live for trillions of years, you're in the same boat, or you still have a lifespan, right? There's still going to be an end. Our Gurudev, he was mentioning once, like mosquitoes, they live for something like 2 weeks. And to us, for the mosquito, we humans, we look immortal, right? We live to 80, 100 years nowadays, right? So relative to the mosquito's existence, we are like practically immortal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And similarly, we look at like these devas, right? They're worshipable to the human beings. And we think, oh, the devas, they are, so high, so great. And they are from an angle of vision. We think of them as immortal beings, but they also, they also they're also mortal beings, right? So our highest welfare, our eternal welfare can only be met by embracing the lotus feet of Sri Govinda. Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajan. Anyone else have any other comments, questions? Do you want to mention anything else?
So it's
Speak more loudly. Come closer.
Just along with the root means he's also said the desire to perform karma, right?
Right.
So like you already said, that desire it's the change of consciousness. So you don't have the selfish desire.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, we'll go on to verse 55. I like this last sentence, the way it's phrased. Despite his impartiality, Krishna's partiality to his devotees is a matter of marvel. It's a marvelous thing. Okay, so now this is the last verse, actually, of the prayers of Lord Brahma, or the last with this in this particular style. Oh, wow, Divi Shakti's entered the waiting room. So we're pretty much at the end now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are in verse 55. Yam krodha kama sahajapanayadi biti vatsalya moha guru gora vasevya bhavai sanchincha tasya sajashim tanumapurete Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Those who cultivate their thoughts of him through anger, amour, love, natural friendship, fear, parenthood, delusion, reverence, and servitorship, attain to bodies of a form and nature appropriate to the mood of their meditation. I worship that primeval Lord, Govinda. Welcome to Shakti Didi. It's always an honor. Look, I'm here with Suvasini Didi today.
Devi Shakti.
She looks excited to see you.
Good to see you. Oh, nice to see you.
Okay, purport. Devotion is generally of two types, regulative and spontaneous, for Vaidhi and Ragatmika. Devotion of preliminary faith, aroused by following the instructions of the Guru and the scriptures, is actuated by obligation to scriptural injunctions. And so devotional sentiment is always limited in that sphere. However, such regulative devotion becomes loving spontaneity when the devotee's attempts to please the Lord by his service gradually deepen. It's very nice. This is quite very nicely articulated line. It's covering a lot of ground. Because this kind of encapsulates our program, the program that's been laid down by our gurus. Such regulative devotion becomes loving spontaneity when the devotee's attempts to please the Lord by his service gradually deepen. When bhav, or the budding stage of divine love, is aroused, the devotee can become a recipient of Krishna's grace. To attain this stage takes much time, and such an attempt through devotional service, regulated by reverence and scriptural edicts, is known as Vaidhi Bhakti. Ragatmika Bhakti, devotion based on the pure heart sentiment or instinctive attachment, is superior. It bears fruits very swiftly and is the attractor of Krishna himself. The various forms it takes are described in this shloka. Shanta Bhav, or the heart's aptitude for peacefulness and reverence. Like a passive sort of devotion. It's full, devotion, adherence to the Lord, surrender to the Lord, but not manifesting in an active, physical way. Dasya Bhav, or the heart's aptitude for servitude and submission. Sakya Bhav, or the heart's aptitude for friendship and natural affection. Vatsalya Bhav, or the heart's aptitude for parenthood. And Madhura Bhav, or the heart's aptitude for amorous love. These 5 are in the scope of Ragatmika Bhakti. Despite being spontaneous impulses, anger, fear, and delusion are not devotion, bhakti, because these are hostile sentiments, unconducive to devotion. In case that wasn't clear. Anger is seen in demons like Shishupal. Fear is seen in demons like Kamsa. And delusion is found in the pundits of the Mayavadi school. They all respectively have the feelings of anger, fear, and complete self-forgetfulness, and identifying themselves with the Brahman. But none of these sentiments are conducive to devotion for the Lord, so none can be admitted to have the qualification of devotion. On the other hand, although of the above-mentioned 5 rasas, of Shanta, etc., in the mood of peacefulness or Shanta, there is a predominance of indifference. It is almost devoid of devotional sentiment. It is nonetheless reckoned as devotion due to its favorability, however slight. There is abundant devotional sentiment in the other 4 moods. In accordance with the Lord's promise in Sri Gita to reciprocate the attitude of a soul's surrender, Ye yatamam prapadyante tamstataiva bhajamyaham. Those who foster the sentiments of anger, fear, and delusion in relationship to the Lord attain to the swoon of Sayuja Mukti, or liberation by merging. The adherents of Shanta attain to forms conducive to absorption in Brahman and Paramatman. The adherents of Dasya and Sakya attain to appropriate male or female forms according to their qualifications. The adherents of Vatsalya attain to forms appropriate for fatherly or motherly sentiments. And the adherents of Shringara attain to the pure form of gopis, or spiritual milkmaids of Braja. So, one very important point that's being raised here is these 2 lines of pure devotion, right? The Vaidhi Bhakti and Raga Bhakti, right? Vaidhi Bhakti, as is explained here, devotion that is regulated by the injunctions of scripture, right? And the sadhu, the guru. And Raga Bhakti, a natural, spontaneous flow of love, devotion, attraction towards the Lord. The word rag, it literally is something like, it's attachment. Is it attachment?
Attraction.
Attraction. Like that. For the Lord. It is very natural from the heart. Right? So this line is very nice, because, we understand that persons like ourselves, we don't have that pure spontaneous flow, and it's not something that should be imitated, right? We have to begin where we really are, right? And pretending to have something that we don't will not be helpful at all. Right? And so the guidance given by our gurus is that we are aspiring for that higher expression of divine love, that higher expression of devotion to the Lord, where there's a natural automatic flow. But in our current level, because we're still going through anartini vritti, right? We're going through a process of purification. Then we're following some guidelines, right? We have some program that we're following. We're following some sadhana, some regulated program, right? The residents of Vrindavan, they will take an apple from the tree, take a bite out of that apple. Oh, Krishna, this is so sweet and crunchy and crispy. Please, you gotta try this. And they can give their half-eaten apple to Krishna. But in our stage, that's not recommended. Lately, just recently, in one of the devotees' homes I was visiting, they had these books, some of the Babajis, who were present in the time of Bhakti Vinod and Saraswati Thakur. And I really appreciated hearing about Vamshidas Babaji. He was probably the most eccentric of the group of pure Babajis who we hear about, and all kinds of things. Like one story I liked very much. He had these deities that he would travel with. He had deities of Gaur Nitai, he had deities of Radha Krishna, and he had a small Gopal deity that he was very attached to him. And he would speak with them all day long, and his behavior was highly eccentric. But one very funny story I read of him in this little book was on one occasion he cooked some sweet rice for his small Gopal deity. And then as soon as he finished cooking it, he threw it on the grounds. and he told his Gopal deity, what is this? You've run away from me. You've gone and had this sweet rice they cooked in the Radha Varman temple, this temple in Vrindavan, made with palm fruit sugar, special sugar. So why should I give you more? You've already gone off and taken somewhere else. Why should I give you more? And there's Evan. Chai, Evan, great to see you. So, this is like we can understand this to be a very elevated, expression of devotion. Dana, did you want to say something? Or she turned her mic on, but maybe, not sure. But yeah, okay, not sure what happened. But yeah, there's so many wonderful stories. I came across another occasion. There was one school teacher who came to visit him, and he offered some special mangoes. And Vamshidas Babaji, actually the day before it was Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday. And Vamshidas Babaji, he said, last year I gave you this other fruit, palm fruit. This year on Janmashtami, I'm going to offer you some mangoes. And then sure enough, later that day, there was one man, he was a high school teacher. He came with a bag of beautiful, bright mangoes. And he said that, at midnight, I woke up, I had this dream where I was given an instruction, I had to buy these mangoes. And now I'm coming here, and I was told I had to bring them to you. And so then Vamshidas Babaji, he offered the mangoes to his deity. And then he sat with this gentleman, this high school teacher. And then suddenly he started speaking to his deity. And he said, First he said, count 1, 2. And then a few minutes went by, and then he gave this he gave another question. He gave a question on grammar. In Bengali, there are 3 different S's, and he asked a question about this to his Gopal deity, you know. And the people who were around were bewildered, you know. And then someone explained, oh, I think because there's this high school teacher here, Vamsidas Babaji is inspired to impart some education, you know, to his Gopal deity. There's so many wonderful stories, you know. So this is a very, you know, elevated type of raga bhakti, you know, natural attachment, loving attachment for their Lord. The Vatsalya rasa, this is called Vatsalya rasa, the parental, right, guardian mood towards the Lord. So, you know, we appreciate these things and we worship that, right, on an upper shelf, but we're not going to imitate, you know, that type of behavior. But we worship that, and we know that that is also our birthright. You know, if we can follow the line that has been shown to us by our gurus, you know, we may one day reach that, you know, when we are ready for that. You could also think of it as like in the, say, like in dance or in music, right? You know, persons have to go through so much rigorous training, like learning the foundational steps, right? But once they've learned that, you know, like ballet, you know, once you've learned that, Divi Shakti can tell us about that. She was on Broadway. We have a Broadway star here. Sorry, you must get really tired of people saying that. But more significantly, she's a Vaishnava superstar. But, you know, there's like so much vigorous training that you have to go through, like tedious training you have to go through, right? You know, think about like learning that, or think about learning the alphabet, like learning how to string sentences together that are grammatically correct, right? But once you get through all that training, you can create beautiful poetry, beautiful dance, beautiful music, right? So it's like that. Now we're going through a period of training and purification. And eventually, you know, by the grace of our guardians, we will fly, we will dance, we will sing. It will be a natural expression. So this line I really appreciate. Such regulative devotion becomes loving spontaneity when the devotee's attempts to please the Lord by his service gradually deepen. And this is the key. And our Gurudev, he made this point once also, that this is the main point in Raga Bhakti, Raga Marga devotion, that is based on this hankering and this earnest desire to please the Lord. And as that increases, then one will naturally, you know, transition into this other expression. It will be an irresistible thing. And there's not, sadly, you come across groups who try to artificially enter that type of devotion, right? That, oh, now I'm ready for this higher type of devotion. But that is not how it will be. It will be something irresistible. And the real devotees of such caliber, you know, they have a shyness about them. You know, they always feel they're unqualified. And they will only transition to such a high stage of devotional service if it is irresistible. They'll be apologizing, you know. Our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, in his last days, you know, many of us have heard, you know, he was chanting this one prayer of Madhavendra Puri. Yesterday, Suvasini Didi and I, we happened to come across on my hard drive one recording of our Gurudev chanting that, you know, very intense, heartfelt mood. You know, he was repeatedly chanting this verse, and that this particular verse of Madhavendra Puri, it's like an apology where he's saying, he's apologizing to all the different Vedic practices that one is generally expected to follow, right? Different prayers, different rituals throughout the day, you know, and offerings to the ancestors and so many things, you know. In Madhavendra Puri, he's saying, please forgive me, I can't follow you anymore. right? My heart's being pulled. I feel that everything I need will be attained by simply remembering the lotus feet of Sri Govinda. But he's saying, forgive me, right? I can't follow that anymore. So this is the real feeling, and we don't need to, preemptively, go into that, artificially go into that, And speaking of these Babajis, who I was mentioning, another exalted Babaji in our line is Gaur Kishore, right? He's on our altar. And one story of him, our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj liked to tell was, Gaur Kishore, these Babajis, they were all very eccentric because they're here physically in this world, but totally beyond this world, always living relative to the highest plane, right? And so they're not conforming. They don't need to conform to the customs of society. They're not living to show an example for souls like ourselves, which is different from an acharya, right? An acharya is someone who's showing an example for people like us. But these Babajis, they're beyond all that, right? And so there's one story, Gaur Kishore, he would often show symptoms of divine love, and on occasion, and he lived at one time he was living in one like simple little hut on the banks of the Ganges. And on one occasion, someone came, and there were so many pretenders, right? And on one occasion, someone came and set up shop, so to speak, right next to him, made a similar living arrangement, and would imitate Gaur Kishore and showing many symptoms of divine love and chanting and all these things. And somebody asked Gaur Kishore, Babaji Das Babaji Maharaj, what do you think about him? Like, is he the real thing, or what's he about? What do you think of him? And Gaur Kishore, Babaji Maharaj, he said, if a woman enters a labor room and begins making so many noises like she's giving birth, will a child actually come? But no, there are certain, activities that are required before that, for the conception of that child. That's required first, right? So in the same way, it is ridiculous for us to try to imitate, the realization, the behavior of these higher devotees, but we need to, follow the way that's been laid out for us, and everything will come of its own accord. If we water the roots, we hear from our Param Gurudev Srila Sri Maharaj, this was something Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati used to say, give our attention to the roots, water the roots, and the fruits will come of itself. We don't need to try to cheaply purchase the fruits or purchase some cheap imitation. But we give our attention to the soil, we give our attention to nourishing the root, and the plant will come, the fruit will come automatically. This is the advice of our gurus. And then going back to the purport here, then these different relationships with the Lord are being described. And yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say here. Anyone else want to add anything? Sebastian, do you have anything? Divi Shakti, do you have anything you want to share? Still have a few minutes left. He's sowing for their lordships. Well, yeah, I think we can, I don't want to go on to the next verse. The next verse is a little longer, and I'd like to spend a little more time on it. So we've actually come to the end of these Govindam Adi prayers by Lord Brahma. So we just finished on verse 55. And then we just have a few verses left. Here's Chintamani coming in the last few moments. Then we just have a few verses left. This next verse, I can perhaps just, preface the verse by saying it gives a very beautiful description of Vrindavan Dham, which our Gurudev appreciated very much. And I heard particularly in some of his talks when he first started traveling out of India, he would chant this verse, showing what is the beauty of Vrindavan Dham, our home, our true home. And then after that verse, and there is a very helpful. Let's see, there's four verses of instruction from Krishna to Lord Brahma, which are very helpful. And we had some discussion on this in one of our earlier meetings, how like we all have an interesting relationship with Lord Brahma, like whether we're aware of it or not, for multiple reasons, One is that he's the head of our sampradaya. Yesterday with Dulal Krishna Prabhu, we had this discussion of the different Vaishnava sampradayas, right? And we are branching off from the Brahma Madhva sampradaya. So, each of these four lineages, they have like a presiding guru and presiding deity, Ishta Devata. And Lord Brahma is the guru of this lineage, of Madhvacharya's lineage. And so there's that connection with Lord Brahma. And then another point is that Lord Brahma is also representing all of us in a sense, right? In the sense that he's kind of like represents the highest point of karma mishra bhakti, right? Karma that is mixed with mundane desire, right? And we see that in the scripture Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which I believe I was just mentioning perhaps yesterday or recently. Well, I mentioned a lot. It's a very helpful text for us. But in the first part of this text, this holy text, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Narada, right? Narada Muni, he's on a mission, right, to find the greatest devotee of all time. And he keeps getting sent from one to another, but it's all happening in a very systematic, like, way of gradation, right? And so Lord Brahma, and so each devotee that he comes to visit is representing a particular type of devotion, right? Level, and so before, Prahlad Maharaj is representing Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion, in Shanta Rasa, the passive mood of devotion. And then prior to Prahlad, there's Jnana Mishra Bhakti, right? Devotion mixed with the tendency for liberation, right? Renunciation. And prior to that is Karma Mishra Bhakti, devotion mixed with desires for the world, right? Some gain in the world. And so Lord Brahma is representing the height of that, right? Because, okay, he's a great devotee of the Lord, that should not be undermined. But he also has some, he also represents Rajagun, right? The mode of passion. And he has this desire to create, right? He's involved with the running of the universe. So this is, so he's like, he has a genuine desire to serve the Lord, but he also has a genuine desire, for worldly attainments, right? And so he represents many of us in that sense, right? There's a lot of Mishra. Mishra means mixed, right? It's Mishra, it's all Mishra for us, right? So he's representing us in that sense, right? That we have a desire to serve, right? That's why we're all here. We have an attraction to bhakti, But at the same time, we have our mundane desires and we can't deny them. And we also don't need to deny them, right? It should be a gradual, wholesome, natural process, right, of progress. So then Lord Brahma is asking Krishna for advice on this, and Krishna gives 4 verses of instruction in this regard, which are very helpful for all of us. So we'll save all of that for next time. So and also I'm trying to get Lalita Madhava to join us next week. He's back on the same time zone as us. He's been in Singapore the last few months, and it was a little difficult for him to join, but he's in England now, so we're hoping that he's going to join us next Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Anyone have any final comments before we close the meeting for today? Welcome, Chintamani, came in the last few moments. I love it. I love it how our group, like, you know, even if they only get the last few minutes, they're still going to tune in. You know, I love that. Good to see you, Dulal Prabhu and Scarlett. Thank you all for turning on your cameras. There's Chintamani, Devi Shakti, Sulalita. Dhanavad, all of you. Okay, so we'll see you all next week. Subhasini, come say goodbye to our group.
Dhanavad, everyone. Nice to see you. Happy to be back.
Srinath, will you come and say hello? No, here's Ananda. We have Srinath here also, Subhasini's son. Would you believe they've all been out shooting hoops? Would you believe Subhasini Didi made the basketball team?
Subhasini won. She beat all of us.
Subhasini made the basketball team in college. Like, seriously, she made the team. She's like an incredible shooter.
Thank you very much for today.
What did you say?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for today.
Thank you for joining and sharing your beautiful shining face, Scarlett. Haribo. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Sri Brahma-samhita ki Jai. All the some speakers ki Jai. Shri Harina. Jai Gaur Premanande.
Haribo.
Haribo.